The rain poured down heavily on the empty parking lot behind the old warehouse district. Marcus Williams pulled his jacket tighter as he hurried toward his car after finishing his late shift at the construction site. The sound of his footsteps echoed against the wet concrete, mixing with the steady drumming of raindrops on metal roofing. He was exhausted and looking forward to getting home to his small apartment where a warm meal and his favorite television show waited for him. As Marcus fumbled with his car keys in the dim light, a strange sound caught his attention. At first he thought it might be the wind rattling some loose metal, but as he stopped to listen more carefully, he realized it was something else entirely. The sound was coming from behind a large dumpster about 30 feet away. It was a low, pitiful whimpering that seemed to carry a desperate plea for help. Marcus hesitated for a moment. His logical mind told him to get in his car and drive home. It was late, he was tired, and getting involved in whatever was happening behind that dumpster could lead to trouble. But something about the sound tugged at his heart. He had always been the type of person who couldn't ignore when someone or something was in distress. His mother had raised him to be compassionate, often telling him that kindness was never wasted, even when it seemed inconvenient. Slowly, Marcus approached the dumpster, his phone's flashlight cutting through the darkness. The whimpering grew louder as he got closer, and he could hear the sound of something moving against the wet pavement. When he finally peered around the corner of the large metal container, his heart nearly broke at what he saw. Huddled against the brick wall was a pit bull, but this wasn't the fierce, intimidating dog that many people imagined when they thought of the breed. This animal was clearly terrified and in terrible condition. The dog's coat was matted and dirty, with patches of fur missing that revealed raw, irritated skin underneath. The animal was shivering uncontrollably, not just from the cold rain but from what appeared to be pure fear. What struck Marcus most was the dog's eyes. They were wide with terror, darting back and forth as if expecting danger from every direction. The pit bull had pressed itself as far back against the wall as possible, trying to make itself as small as it could. Around its neck was a heavy chain that had rubbed the skin raw, and Marcus could see that the animal was painfully thin, its ribs visible even through its thick coat. The dog noticed Marcus and immediately began to tremble even more violently. It let out a small, frightened whine and tried to push itself further into the corner, though there was nowhere left to go. Marcus could see that this animal had been hurt badly by humans before. The fear in its eyes spoke of abuse, neglect, and probably abandonment. Someone had clearly treated this innocent creature terribly, and now it was alone, sick, and scared in a dangerous part of town. Marcus felt anger rising in his chest, not at the dog but at whoever had done this to such a helpless animal. He had always believed that how people treated animals said a lot about their character, and whoever had hurt this dog was clearly lacking in basic human decency. But his anger quickly turned to determination. He couldn't change what had happened to this poor animal, but he could certainly do something about its current situation. Moving very slowly and speaking in the softest voice he could manage, Marcus began to approach the frightened pit bull. He had grown up around dogs and knew that sudden movements or loud noises could make a scared animal even more panicked. He crouched down to make himself appear less threatening and extended his hand palm up, allowing the dog to catch his scent. The pit bull watched his every movement with intense focus, ready to bolt if Marcus made any move that seemed dangerous. The animal's breathing was rapid and shallow, and Marcus could see that it was not just scared but also exhausted. This dog had probably been surviving on the streets for days or even weeks, scrounging for food and hiding from people who might hurt it further. Marcus began to speak softly to the dog, telling it that everything was going to be okay, that he wasn't going to hurt it. He wasn't sure if his words meant anything to the animal, but he hoped his calm tone might help. He noticed that the dog's ears, which had been pinned back against its head in fear, began to twitch slightly as it listened to his voice. The rain continued to fall steadily, soaking both Marcus and the dog. Marcus realized that he couldn't just leave this animal here to suffer through the night. The temperature was dropping, and in its weakened condition, the dog might not survive much longer without help. He needed to find a way to gain its trust, at least enough to get it somewhere safe and warm. Very carefully, Marcus removed his jacket and held it out toward the dog. The animal flinched at first, but when it realized that Marcus wasn't trying to grab it, the pit bull seemed to relax just slightly. Marcus laid the jacket on the ground between them and slowly backed away a few steps. giving the dog space while showing that he meant no harm. The pit bull stared at the jacket for a long moment, then looked back at Marcus. For the first time since he had discovered the animal, Marcus saw something other than pure terror in its eyes. There was a flicker of curiosity, maybe even a tiny spark of hope. The dog was clearly torn between its fear of humans and its desperate need for help and comfort. As Marcus knelt there in the rain, looking at this broken, frightened animal, he made a decision that would change both of their lives forever. He wasn't going to abandon this dog. He didn't know exactly how he was going to help it, or what challenges lay ahead, but he knew that walking away wasn't an option. This pit bull needed someone to believe in it, to show it that not all humans were cruel. And Marcus was determined to be that person. The first step would be gaining the dog's trust, and Marcus settled in for what he knew might be a long, patient process. He had nowhere else to be that was more important than this moment, sitting in the rain with a terrified animal who desperately needed to learn that the world could still hold kindness. Marcus remained crouched in the rain for nearly an hour, speaking softly to the frightened pit bull and moving with deliberate slowness. The dog had stopped shaking quite as violently, though it still watched his every movement with cautious eyes. The animal seemed to be studying him, trying to figure out whether this human was different from the ones who had heard it before. During this time, Marcus began to notice more details about the dog's condition that made his heart ache. There were several old scars visible on the animal's legs and face, suggesting it had been in fights or had been deliberately harmed. The heavy chain around its neck was rusty and had clearly been there for a long time, causing painful sores where it rubbed against the skin. Most heartbreaking of all, Marcus could see that despite its fear, the dog seemed to want human connection. Every few minutes it would take a tiny step forward before quickly retreating, as if part of it remembered what it was like to trust people. When Marcus finally stood up slowly, the dog tensed but didn't run. This small sign of progress encouraged him. He walked carefully to his car and retrieved a bottle of water and half of a sandwich he had saved from lunch. He wasn't sure if the dog would accept food from him, but he had to try. The animal was clearly malnourished and needed sustenance if it was going to have the strength to recover. Returning to his spot near the dumpster, Marcus unwrapped the sandwich and broke it into small pieces. He placed one piece on the ground about 5 feet from the dog and then backed away again. The pit bull's nose twitched as it caught the scent of the food. Marcus could see the internal struggle playing out in the animal's expression, hunger fighting against fear, need battling with self-preservation instincts. After several long minutes, the dog stretched its neck forward and quickly grabbed the piece of sandwich, immediately retreating to its corner to eat. Marcus felt a surge of hope. The fact that the dog had accepted food from him was a significant step forward. He placed another piece, this time a little closer to himself, and waited patiently. This process continued for the better part of another hour. With each piece of sandwich, Marcus moved the food slightly closer to where he sat. The dog began to move with a little more confidence, though it remained ready to flee at the first sign of danger. By the time the sandwich was gone, the pit bull was eating from a spot only 3 feet away from Marcus, close enough that he could see the gratitude in its dark eyes. Marcus then opened his water bottle and poured some into his cupped hand, offering it to the dog. The animal was clearly thirsty, but drinking would require it to come even closer and put itself in a more vulnerable position. For several minutes, the dog just stared at the water, its tongue darting out occasionally to lick its dry lips. Finally, desperation won over fear, and the pit bull slowly approached Marcus's outstretched hand. The moment its tongue touched the water, the dog seemed to forget its caution entirely. It lapped up every drop eagerly, and when Marcus refilled his palm, the animal didn't hesitate to drink again. For the first time since Marcus had found it, the dog wasn't trembling. As the pit bull drank, Marcus was able to get a better look at its condition. The animal was definitely a female, probably around 2 or 3 years old based on her size and features. Despite her terrible condition, he could see that she had beautiful markings, a white chest and white tips on her paws that contrasted with her dark brindle coat. Her ears had been cropped short, which made Marcus angry all over again, as this was often done for fighting dogs. When the dog had finished drinking, she didn't immediately retreat to her corner. Instead, she sat down about 2 feet from Marcus and looked at him directly for the first time. Her tail wasn't wagging, but it wasn't tucked between her legs either. It was the posture of an animal that was beginning to hope that maybe, just maybe, this human might be different. Marcus realized that he had reached a critical moment. The dog was starting to trust him, but she was still far too scared to let him touch her or put a leash on her. He needed to find a way to get her to safety without forcing her, which could destroy all the progress they had made. He also knew that sitting in this parking lot all night wasn't an option. The area wasn't safe, and both he and the dog needed to get out of the rain. Thinking quickly, Marcus remembered that his car was an old SUV with a large back area. If he could somehow convince the dog to get into the vehicle voluntarily, he could take her somewhere safe and warm. He stood up slowly and walked to his car, opening the back hatch. The dog watched nervously but didn't run. Marcus returned with a blanket he kept in his emergency kit and spread it on the ground between the car and where the dog sat. He then took several steps back and waited. The pit bull approached the blanket cautiously, sniffed it thoroughly, and then, to Marcus's amazement, lay down on it. The soft fabric was probably the most comfort she had felt in weeks. This gave Marcus an idea. Very slowly, he began to drag the blanket toward his car, moving just a few inches at a time. The dog stayed on the blanket, seeming to understand that this human was trying to help her get somewhere better. When they reached the back of the SUV, Marcus faced his biggest challenge yet. The dog needed to jump up into the cargo area, but she was weak, and the height might be too much for her. Marcus gently patted the floor of the cargo area and spoke encouragingly to her. The pit bull stood up on shaky legs and looked into the car. She could probably sense that this enclosed space would mean giving up her ability to run if things went wrong. For a long moment, dog and man looked at each other in the dim light of the parking lot. Marcus held his breath, knowing that this decision would determine whether he could help her or would have to leave her behind. The rain continued to fall, and somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, a reminder of how dangerous this neighborhood could be at night. Then, with what must have taken tremendous courage for such a frightened animal, the pit bull gathered her remaining strength and jumped into the back of Marcus's SUV. She immediately pressed herself against the far corner, but she was inside. She had chosen to trust him. Marcus's eyes filled with tears as he gently closed the hatch. This brave, broken dog had taken a leap of faith, literally and figuratively. As he drove toward the nearest 24-hour veterinary clinic, he could see her in his rearview mirror, still scared but no longer alone. Neither of them knew it yet, but this was the beginning of a bond that would prove just how much love and loyalty could grow from a single act of compassion. The drive to the emergency veterinary clinic was tense and quiet, except for the gentle hum of the heater that Marcus had turned on full blast. He glanced frequently in his rearview mirror at the pit bull, who remained huddled in the corner of the cargo area, still trembling but no longer from the cold. The dog's eyes never left Marcus, watching his every movement through the reflection in the mirror. There was still fear there, but also something new, a fragile thread of trust that Marcus was determined not to break. When they arrived at the clinic, Marcus faced another challenge. The dog would need to get from his car to the building, but she had no collar or leash, and he still couldn't touch her without risking a panic attack. The veterinary clinic was busy even at this late hour, with bright lights and the sounds of other animals that might frighten her further. Marcus parked as close to the entrance as possible and sat in his car for a few minutes, thinking through his options. He could see the dog watching him through the rearview mirror, and he began talking to her again in the same soft voice that had worked in the parking lot. He told her about the veterinarian who would help make her feel better, about how the people here were different from those who had hurt her. Finally, Marcus came up with a plan. He took the blanket that the dog was lying on and very slowly began to wrap it around her, creating a kind of protective cocoon. The pit bull tensed at first when she felt the fabric surrounding her, but Marcus's continued gentle words seemed to calm her. When he was finished, only her head was visible, and she was bundled securely enough that he could carry her without her being able to bolt in panic. The dog trembled as Marcus lifted her, but she didn't struggle. She was heavier than he had expected despite her malnourished state, and he could feel her heart racing against his chest as he carried her toward the clinic entrance. Marcus whispered reassurances, telling her she was safe, that no one was going to hurt her anymore. The veterinary staff was amazing. Dr. Sarah Chen, the veterinarian on duty, took one look at the bundled dog and immediately understood the situation. She had seen cases like this before. animals so traumatized by human cruelty that they required special handling. She quickly led Marcus to a quiet examination room away from the noise and bustle of the main clinic area. Dr. Chen worked with incredible patience and skill. She moved slowly and spoke softly, allowing the dog to see her hands at all times. When she needed to examine the animal, she let the pit bull smell her fingers first and gave her time to process each new person and sensation. Marcus stayed close, providing the familiar presence that the dog had begun to associate with safety. The examination revealed the full extent of the dog's suffering. Besides being severely underweight and dehydrated, she had several infected wounds, particularly around the neck where the chain had rubbed. Her paws were cut and scraped from walking on rough surfaces without protection. Most concerning was a deep gash on her side that appeared to be from a knife or other sharp object. Dr. Chen estimated that the dog hadn't eaten a proper meal in at least 2 weeks, possibly longer, but there was good news too. Despite everything she had endured, the dog's basic health was sound. She was young and strong, and with proper care she could make a full recovery. There were no signs of the aggressive behavior that people often wrongly associated with pit bulls. Instead, Dr. Chen observed, this was clearly a gentle animal who had been failed by the humans who should have protected her. The treatment process took several hours. The dog needed IV fluids for dehydration, antibiotics for infections, and careful cleaning of her wounds. Throughout it all, Marcus stayed by her side. Whenever the dog showed signs of panic, his voice would calm her. Gradually, she began to relax enough to allow the veterinary staff to help her, without the intense fear she had shown earlier. During one quiet moment while they waited for test results, Dr. Chen pulled Marcus aside to talk about what came next. The dog would need weeks of medical care and gradual rehabilitation to overcome her trauma. She would require a patient, experienced owner who understood that healing from abuse took time. Dr. Chen explained that many people who rescued dogs like this became frustrated when the animals didn't immediately transform into happy, trusting pets. Marcus had already been thinking about this. He lived alone in a small apartment, and he had never owned a dog before. His work schedule was demanding, and he wasn't sure he had the knowledge or resources to properly care for such a traumatized animal. The logical thing would be to surrender her to a rescue organization that specialized in rehabilitating abused dogs. But as he looked at the pit bull lying on the examination table, now clean and bandaged, Marcus realized that logic wasn't going to win this argument with his heart. This dog had trusted him when she couldn't trust anyone else. She had taken a leap of faith by getting into his car, and he couldn't abandon her now. If she needed patient, experienced care, then he would learn how to provide it. If she needed someone who wouldn't give up on her, then he was that person. When Dr. Chen returned with the test results, all negative for serious diseases, Marcus told her his decision. He wanted to keep the dog. Dr. Chen smiled and said she had hoped he would say that. She had seen the bond forming between them during the examination, and she believed that this particular dog needed exactly what Marcus could offer: unwavering commitment and genuine care. Dr. Chen spent the next hour giving Marcus a crash course in caring for a traumatized rescue dog. She explained the importance of routine, of moving slowly and letting the dog set the pace for recovery. She gave him a detailed care plan, scheduled follow-up appointments, and provided him with the phone numbers of animal behaviorists who could help if needed. As dawn broke outside the clinic windows, Marcus prepared to take his new companion home. The dog was still nervous, but noticeably calmer than she had been just hours earlier. The heavy chain had been removed and replaced with a soft, adjustable collar, and she had eaten a small meal of easily digestible food. For the first time in probably weeks, she wasn't in pain. Dr. Chen helped Marcus load the dog back into his SUV, this time in a proper carrier that would keep her secure and comfortable during the ride. As they drove home through the quiet morning streets, Marcus looked in his rearview mirror and saw something that made his heart swell with hope. The pit bull wasn't huddled in the corner anymore. She was lying down calmly, and for just a moment, he could swear he saw her tail move in what might have been the beginning of a wag. Marcus had no idea that this frightened, broken dog would soon show him a form of gratitude so pure and joyful that it would change his understanding of what it meant to be truly appreciated. All he knew was that he had made a commitment to help her heal, and he intended to keep that promise no matter how long it took. The first few weeks of having the pit bull in his apartment were unlike anything Marcus had ever experienced. He had decided to call her Luna, inspired by the way he had found her in the darkness and brought her into the light. Luna spent most of her time in the corner of Marcus's living room, where he had set up a comfortable bed with blankets and pillows. She would venture out only when absolutely necessary to eat the small meals he left for her or to go outside for quick bathroom breaks. Marcus had to completely restructure his life around Luna's needs and fears. He learned to move slowly through his own apartment, to speak softly even when he was on the phone, and to avoid sudden movements that might startle her. When friends wanted to visit, he had to explain that Luna wasn't ready for strangers yet. Some of his friends didn't understand why he was going to so much trouble for a dog, especially one that seemed so damaged and unresponsive. But Marcus saw progress in small things that others might have missed. Luna had stopped flinching every time he walked past her corner. She began to watch him with curiosity rather than pure fear when he prepared her meals. Most encouraging of all, she had started eating immediately when he put her food down, rather than waiting hours until she was sure he wasn't going to take it away from her. The breakthrough came during the 3rd week. Marcus was sitting on his couch reading a book when he noticed Luna standing at the edge of her bed area, looking at him. This was unusual. Normally, she stayed curled up in her corner unless she needed something. Marcus looked up from his book and saw something in Luna's posture that was different. Her ears weren't pinned back in fear, and her tail wasn't tucked between her legs. She seemed to be considering something. Very slowly, Luna took a step toward Marcus, then another. Marcus held perfectly still, barely breathing as she approached his couch. When she was about 3 feet away, she stopped and sat down, just looking at him. They stayed that way for several minutes, human and dog simply acknowledging each other's presence without pressure or expectations. Then Luna did something that brought tears to Marcus's eyes. She lay down on the floor next to the couch, close enough that he could have reached down and touched her if he had wanted to. She didn't quite trust him enough for physical contact yet, but she had chosen to be near him. For an animal that had been so terrified of human proximity, this was enormous progress. From that day forward, Luna began to show more signs of recovery. She started following Marcus around the apartment at a distance, always staying far enough away to run if needed, but clearly wanting to be where he was. When he cooked dinner, she would lie in the kitchen doorway watching him. When he watched television in the evening, she would settle on the floor nearby. Marcus began to catch glimpses of what Luna must have been like before her terrible experiences. Sometimes he would see her playing with a toy he had bought for her, tossing it in the air and catching it, but only when she thought he wasn't looking. If she realized he was watching, she would immediately stop and return to her more cautious behavior. It was as if she remembered how to be happy, but wasn't sure it was safe to show it. The first time Luna allowed Marcus to touch her was during her 4th week with him. He was sitting on the floor reading, and Luna had settled nearby as had become her habit. A thunderstorm rolled through the area, and the loud sounds clearly frightened her. She began to shake and whine, looking around frantically for somewhere to hide. Without thinking, Marcus extended his hand toward her, palm up, and spoke softly. "It's okay, Luna. You're safe. It's just noise. It can't hurt you." To his amazement, Luna crept forward and pressed her head against his palm. The moment his skin made contact with her fur, Marcus felt a jolt of emotion. This dog, who had been so terrified of human touch, was seeking comfort from him. Marcus very gently stroked Luna's head and ears while the storm raged outside. She trembled against his hand, but she didn't pull away. When the thunder was particularly loud, she would press closer to him, and Marcus found himself murmuring reassurances and promises that no one would ever hurt her again. By the time the storm passed, Luna was lying against his leg, still allowing him to pet her. After that night, the barriers between them began to fall more quickly. Luna started coming to Marcus when he called her name. She began to greet him at the door when he came home from work, her tail giving tentative wags. Most wonderfully, she started to play openly, bringing him toys and engaging in gentle games of tug-of-war. Dr. Chen was amazed by Luna's progress during their follow-up visits. The physical wounds had healed beautifully and Luna had gained healthy weight. More importantly, her behavior showed that she was learning to trust again. Dr. Chen commented that in her experience, dogs who had been as severely traumatized as Luna rarely recovered this quickly or completely. She credited Marcus's patience and consistency for creating the safe environment Luna needed to heal. As Luna's confidence grew, so did her personality. Marcus discovered that she was actually a playful, intelligent dog with a gentle sense of humor. She would steal his socks and bring them to him as presents. She learned to open doors by turning the handles with her paws. She even figured out how to work the television remote, though this was usually at inconvenient times like during important phone calls. But perhaps the most remarkable thing about Luna's recovery was how she seemed to understand that Marcus had saved her life. There was something special in the way she looked at him, a depth of gratitude and devotion that went beyond normal pet-owner relationships. She would often sit and stare at him with an expression that seemed to say thank you in a way that transcended words. Marcus began to notice that Luna had a particular behavior that she only displayed around him. When she was especially happy or excited, she would do a little spinning dance, turning in circles with her tail wagging furiously. At first he thought it was just random, playful behavior, but he started to see patterns. She would dance when he came home from work, when he gave her special treats, and whenever he spent extra time playing with her. What Marcus didn't realize was that this dancing behavior was Luna's way of expressing the profound gratitude she felt toward the man who had saved her from a life of fear and suffering. Dogs, especially intelligent ones like pit bulls, have their own ways of showing deep emotion, and Luna had developed this unique dance as her personal expression of joy and thankfulness. As their bond deepened and Luna's confidence continued to grow, Marcus had no idea that her grateful dancing was about to become something much more spectacular, a display of pure joy and appreciation that would amaze everyone who witnessed it and prove just how deeply dogs can feel and express love for those who show them kindness. 2 months after Marcus had found Luna in that rainy parking lot, their daily routine had settled into something beautiful and comfortable. Every morning, Luna would wake Marcus up by gently placing her paw on his arm and giving him soft kisses on his face. She had learned that this was much more effective than barking, and it had become their special morning ritual. Marcus would wake up to see her brown eyes looking at him with pure love and excitement for the day ahead. Luna had transformed from the terrified, broken animal he had rescued into a confident, joyful dog who seemed to embrace every moment of her new life. Her coat had grown back thick and shiny. Her wounds had healed completely and she had gained the perfect amount of weight. But more than her physical transformation, it was her emotional healing that truly amazed everyone who met her. Dr. Chen had introduced Marcus to other dog owners in the area, and slowly Luna began to socialize with both people and other dogs. She was naturally gentle and friendly, though she remained somewhat reserved with strangers until she had time to assess whether they were safe. Children in particular seemed to bring out her protective and nurturing instincts. She would sit patiently while they petted her, her tail wagging slowly as if she understood they needed extra care and gentleness. Marcus had also started taking Luna to a local dog park where she could run and play freely. At first she had stayed close to his side, unsure about the open space and the other dogs. But gradually she began to explore and make friends. Other dog owners were often surprised to learn that Luna was a pit bull, as she displayed none of the aggressive stereotypes people sometimes associated with the breed. Instead, she was playful, gentle, and remarkably well-behaved. It was at the dog park that Marcus first noticed how special Luna's dancing had become. Whenever she was particularly excited or happy, she would break into her spinning dance routine. But over time, this had evolved into something much more elaborate and expressive. She would spin in circles, then jump and twist in the air, sometimes adding little hops and bounds that seemed almost choreographed. Other dog owners began to gather around to watch Luna's performances. They had never seen anything quite like it. Most dogs might wag their tails or jump around when excited, but Luna's dancing was different. It was more intentional, more artistic, almost as if she was consciously trying to express something specific through movement. Marcus started to realize that Luna's most elaborate dancing routines happened during moments that seemed to trigger her deepest gratitude. When he gave her a new toy, she would dance. When they returned home after a long walk, she would dance. When he sat down to pet her after being away at work, she would dance. It was as if her whole body needed to express the joy and thankfulness that simple tail wagging couldn't contain. The dancing reached a new level of complexity during Luna's 3rd month with Marcus. He had been working longer hours on a particularly challenging construction project, and Luna had clearly missed their usual extended playtime together. When the project finally finished and Marcus came home early one Friday afternoon, Luna's reaction was unlike anything he had seen before. As soon as Marcus walked through the door, Luna began what could only be described as a full dance performance. She spun in circles, jumped and twisted in the air, bounced on her hind legs, and even seemed to bow at certain points. The routine went on for nearly 5 full minutes, with Luna adding movements that Marcus had never seen her do before. She would spin clockwise, then counterclockwise, then jump straight up and spin in the air before landing gracefully. Marcus found himself laughing and cheering, which only seemed to encourage Luna to make her dance even more elaborate. She incorporated the furniture into her routine, jumping onto the couch and then leaping off with a dramatic twist. She would run to one corner of the room, perform a series of spins, then run to another corner and repeat with variations. What struck Marcus most was the look of pure joy on Luna's face during these performances. Her mouth was open in what looked like a huge smile, her tongue hanging out, and her eyes were bright with happiness and excitement. This wasn't just random playful behavior. This was a dog consciously choosing to express her emotions through elaborate, joyful movement. Marcus began recording Luna's dancing on his phone to share with Dr. Chen and his friends. The videos quickly became popular among everyone who saw them. Dr. Chen had never seen anything quite like it in her years of veterinary practice. She explained that while dogs certainly feel gratitude and form deep emotional bonds with their owners, Luna's dancing represented an unusually sophisticated form of emotional expression. Word of Luna's dancing began to spread beyond Marcus's immediate circle. A local news reporter heard about the unusual pit bull who danced to show gratitude and asked to do a story about Luna and Marcus. At first, Marcus was hesitant. He didn't want Luna to become some kind of spectacle, and he was concerned that too much attention might stress her or set back her progress. But when the reporter explained that the story could help change people's perceptions about pit bulls and show how resilient and loving rescued animals could be, Marcus agreed to a brief interview. The reporter was amazed when Luna performed one of her elaborate dance routines on camera. The resulting news segment showed Luna spinning and jumping with joy, while Marcus explained how he had found her and how far she had come. The response to the news story was overwhelming. People from all over the city began reaching out to Marcus, sharing their own rescue stories and expressing amazement at Luna's remarkable recovery and unique way of showing gratitude. Several animal rescue organizations contacted him to ask if he would consider bringing Luna to adoption events, not to find her a new home, but to show potential adopters what was possible when damaged animals were given patient, loving care. Marcus was happy to help with these events, and Luna seemed to enjoy the attention and the opportunity to meet new people. At every event, she would inevitably break into one of her dance routines, delighting the crowds and helping to dispel negative stereotypes about pit bulls. Children especially loved her performances, and Luna seemed to understand that she was serving as an ambassador for her breed. But the most meaningful moments still happened at home, during quiet evenings when it was just Marcus and Luna together. She would settle beside him on the couch, sometimes placing her head on his lap, and Marcus would stroke her fur while thinking about the journey they had taken together. In those peaceful moments, he was reminded of the frightened, broken animal he had found behind that dumpster, and he marveled at the transformation that love and patience had made possible. Luna's dancing had become more than just an expression of gratitude. It had become a symbol of hope, resilience, and the healing power of compassion. But Marcus had no idea that Luna's most spectacular performance was yet to come, and that it would happen at a moment when her gratitude and love would need to shine brighter than. 6 months after Luna had come into his life, Marcus faced the biggest challenge of their time together. He had been feeling unwell for several weeks, experiencing fatigue and occasional dizziness that he had initially attributed to stress from work. But when he collapsed at a job site one afternoon, his co-workers rushed him to the hospital where doctors discovered that he had developed a serious heart condition that required immediate surgery. The news hit Marcus like a thunderbolt. At 35 years old, he had always been healthy and active. The doctors explained that he had a congenital heart defect that had gone undetected until now, and that the stress of recent months had likely triggered the current crisis. The surgery would be complex and would require several weeks of recovery, during which he would need to severely limit his physical activity. Marcus's first concern wasn't for himself, but for Luna. What would happen to her while he was in the hospital? Who would care for her with the patience and understanding she still needed? The thought of having to surrender her to a shelter or rescue organization, even temporarily, made his heart ache more than his physical condition did. Luna had come so far in her recovery, and Marcus knew that being separated from him and placed in an unfamiliar environment could undo months of progress. Dr. Chen, who had become not just Luna's veterinarian but also a close friend to both of them, offered to help find a solution. She knew several experienced foster families who specialized in caring for special needs animals, but when she brought up the subject with Marcus, he could see the worry and confusion in Luna's eyes. Dogs are incredibly perceptive, and Luna had clearly sensed that something was wrong with her beloved human. The night before Marcus was scheduled to go into the hospital, Luna's behavior became increasingly anxious. She followed him everywhere, pressing close to his side and whining softly whenever he sat down. It was as if she understood that something was about to change, and her fear of abandonment dormant for months began to resurface. She kept bringing him her favorite toys, as if offering them as gifts might somehow prevent whatever was about to happen. When bedtime came, Luna did something she had never done before. Instead of settling in her own bed as usual, she jumped onto Marcus's bed and curled up right next to him, pressing her warm body against his side. Marcus didn't have the heart to move her, and truthfully her presence was comforting to him as well. They spent the night together, both of them restless and worried about what the morning would bring. Marcus's sister Sarah arrived early the next morning to drive him to the hospital. She had volunteered to care for Luna during his recovery, despite having no experience with dogs. Sarah was a kind person, but she lived in a small apartment across town and worked long hours as a nurse. Marcus knew she would do her best, but he also knew that Luna needed more specialized care than Sarah could provide. As Marcus gathered his things for the hospital stay, Luna became increasingly agitated. She seemed to understand that the suitcase and the serious conversations meant that Marcus was going away. She began pacing around the apartment, whining and occasionally letting out small, heartbroken howls. When Sarah tried to approach her with a leash, Luna backed away and looked at Marcus with eyes full of confusion and fear. The moment of separation was heartbreaking. Marcus knelt down to say goodbye to Luna, and she immediately began one of her dance routines. But this wasn't the joyful, exuberant dancing he was used to seeing. This was desperate and frantic, as if she was trying to dance hard enough to make him stay. She spun and jumped and bounded around him, her movements becoming more and more frenzied as she realized that her dancing wasn't working its usual magic. When Marcus finally had to leave, Luna let out a long, mournful howl that could be heard even as the car pulled away from the building. Sarah later told him that Luna had spent the entire first day sitting by the door, waiting for Marcus to return. She wouldn't eat, wouldn't play, and barely responded when Sarah tried to comfort her. The surgery went well, but Marcus's recovery was slower than expected. What was supposed to be a 2-week hospital stay stretched into 3 weeks, followed by strict bed rest at home. During this time, Sarah brought Luna to visit him twice, but the visit seemed to make Luna's anxiety worse rather than better. Seeing Marcus in the hospital bed, weak and connected to machines, clearly distressed her. She would try to climb onto the bed to be close to him, and when the nurses prevented this, she would begin her frantic dancing in the small hospital room. Dr. Chen suggested that it might be better to wait until Marcus was home and stronger before reuniting them. Luna was staying with Sarah but was clearly depressed. She had stopped dancing entirely, ate very little, and spent most of her time lying in corners, much like she had during her first weeks with Marcus. It was as if losing Marcus had triggered all of her old fears and traumas. When Marcus was finally allowed to go home, he was still very weak and had strict instructions to avoid any strenuous activity. Sarah brought Luna back to the apartment that same day, and the reunion was both joyful and heartbreaking. Luna was so excited to see Marcus that she immediately began dancing, but she quickly realized that something was still wrong. Marcus was moving slowly and carefully, and he couldn't play with her or take her for walks like he used to. For the first few days, Luna seemed confused and worried. She would bring Marcus his slippers as if trying to encourage him to get up and be active. She would sit by the door with her leash in her mouth, hoping for walks that couldn't happen yet. Most touching of all, she seemed to understand that Marcus was fragile and needed to be treated gently. She stopped jumping on him and instead would very carefully curl up next to him on the couch, providing warmth and comfort without putting any pressure on his healing chest. As the weeks passed and Marcus gradually grew stronger, Luna's joy began to return as well. She seemed to monitor his progress closely, celebrating small milestones in her own special way. The first time Marcus was able to walk around the block with her, she performed a dance routine right there, on the sidewalk that drew applause from passing neighbors, but it was during Marcus's final follow-up appointment with his cardiologist that Luna gave her most meaningful performance yet. Marcus had been cleared to return to normal activities, and the doctor had declared his recovery complete and successful. When they arrived home from that appointment, Marcus sat down in his living room and simply said, "Luna, we made it. We're both going to be okay." What happened next took Marcus's breath away. Luna began the most elaborate, beautiful, and heartfelt dance routine he had ever seen from her. She spun and leaped and bounded with such joy and grace that it brought tears to his eyes. But this wasn't just celebration. This was pure gratitude expressed through movement. Luna was dancing not just because she was happy, but because she understood that the human who had saved her life was now safe and healthy again. The dance went on for nearly 10 minutes, with Luna incorporating movements and sequences that Marcus had never seen before. She would run to different parts of the room, performing different dance segments as if the entire apartment had become her stage. Other tenants in the building later said they could hear the sounds of her dancing and Marcus's laughter echoing through the halls. When Luna finally finished her performance, she walked calmly over to Marcus and placed her head in his lap, looking up at him with eyes full of love and contentment. In that moment, Marcus understood that this incredible dog had just given him the most beautiful gift possible, a dance that expressed not just her gratitude for being rescued, but her deep, abiding love for the human who had shown her that the world could be safe and good again. 2 years had passed since that rainy night when Marcus first discovered Luna behind the dumpster, and their story had taken on a life of its own. The local news segment about Luna's dancing had been picked up by national media outlets, and soon people from across the country were following their journey. Marcus had started a social media account to share videos of Luna's performances, and it had grown to hundreds of thousands of followers who tuned in regularly to watch the dancing pit bull who had captured hearts everywhere. But for Marcus and Luna, the fame was secondary to the deep bond they had built together. Luna had become not just his pet, but his closest companion and the joy of his daily life. She had a routine for everything, a special dance when he came home from work, a different dance when they prepared for walks, and an elaborate celebration dance every Friday evening that seemed to say, "Thank goodness it's the weekend and we can spend more time together." The dancing had evolved into something truly spectacular. Luna had learned to time her movements to music, spinning and leaping in rhythm when Marcus played her favorite songs. She had developed signature moves that followers of her social media account had named the Luna Spin, the Gratitude Leap, and the Joy Bounce. But her most famous routine was still the one she called the Thank You Dance, which she performed whenever she seemed to want to express particular appreciation to Marcus. Their story had also inspired significant, positive change in their community. Local animal shelters reported increased adoption rates for pit bulls, with many potential adopters specifically saying they had been influenced by Luna's story. Marcus had become an unofficial spokesperson for pit bull rescue organizations, speaking at events and helping to educate people about the true nature of these often misunderstood dogs. Dr. Chen often used Luna as an example in her practice when treating other traumatized animals. She would show Luna's videos to owners of rescued pets who were struggling with their animal's recovery, demonstrating that with patience, love, and time, even the most damaged animals could heal and thrive. Several of Dr. Chen's clients had reported breakthrough moments in their own pet's recovery after being inspired by Luna's story. The apartment that had once been Marcus's quiet bachelor pad had been transformed into a home, filled with dog toys, comfortable beds, and the constant presence of Luna's joyful energy. Marcus had learned to arrange his furniture to give Luna maximum space for her dancing, and he had installed better lighting so that the videos he shared would show off her performances to their best advantage. But perhaps the most meaningful change was in Marcus himself. Caring for Luna had taught him patience, empathy, and the deep satisfaction that comes from helping another being heal and thrive. His relationships with friends and family had deepened as they witnessed his dedication to Luna, and saw how the experience had made him more compassionate and thoughtful. His sister Sarah often said that rescuing Luna had rescued Marcus too, turning him from someone who lived life on autopilot into someone who embraced each day with purpose and joy. The defining moment of their journey together came on the second anniversary of their first meeting. Marcus had planned a quiet celebration at home, but friends and followers on social media had organized something much bigger. The local animal shelter where Marcus now volunteered regularly had arranged a special event in Luna's honor. Gratitude Gala to raise money for other animals in need. The event was held in a large community center, and hundreds of people attended. There were other rescued animals and their families, representatives from rescue organizations and people who had simply been touched by Luna's story and wanted to meet her in person. Local businesses had donated prizes for an auction, and several news outlets had sent reporters to cover the celebration. When it came time for the main event, Luna's performance, Marcus was nervous. This would be her biggest audience ever, and he wasn't sure how she would react to such a large crowd. But as he led Luna onto the small stage that had been set up, he could see that she was excited rather than anxious. Her tail was wagging, her ears were perked up, and she seemed to sense that this was a special occasion. Marcus spoke briefly to the crowd about their journey together, about the frightened dog he had found 2 years ago and the incredible animal she had become. He talked about the power of second chances and the importance of never giving up on animals who had been hurt or abandoned. Then he stepped back and gave Luna the simple command that had become their tradition. "Luna, show them how you say thank you." What followed was the most magnificent dance performance Luna had ever given. She seemed to understand that this was her moment to shine, her opportunity to represent all the rescued animals who had found new hope through human kindness. She spun and leaped with incredible grace and energy, incorporating moves that Marcus had never seen before. The crowd watched in amazed silence, then broke into spontaneous applause that only seemed to encourage Luna to dance even more beautifully. But the most touching moment came at the end of her routine. Instead of finishing with her usual bow to Marcus, Luna walked to the edge of the stage and seemed to bow to the entire audience. Then she sat down and looked out at all the people who had gathered to celebrate her story, her tail wagging slowly as if she understood that she had become a symbol of hope for animals everywhere. The applause was thunderous and sustained, with many people wiping away tears. In that moment, Luna wasn't just a dog who had learned to dance. She was a living reminder of the resilience of the animal spirit and the transformative power of compassion. Later that evening, as Marcus and Luna settled into their usual spot on the couch at home, Marcus reflected on the incredible journey they had taken together. The frightened, broken animal he had found behind that dumpster had become a source of joy not just for him, but for thousands of people around the world. Her dancing had started as a simple expression of gratitude to the man who saved her, but it had evolved into something much larger, a celebration of the capacity for healing, the power of love, and the beautiful things that can happen when someone chooses kindness over indifference. As if sensing his thoughts, Luna looked up at Marcus and began one more dance. Not the elaborate performance she had given for the crowd, but the simple, intimate routine she had developed just for him. She spun in a few gentle circles, gave a small leap, and then settled beside him with her head on his lap. In that quiet moment, with Luna's warm presence beside him and the memory of her incredible journey fresh in his mind, Marcus understood that saving Luna had been the most important thing he had ever done. But more than that, he realized that in rescuing her, she had rescued him right back, teaching him lessons about loyalty, gratitude, and unconditional love that would stay with him for the rest of his life. Their story had become proof that sometimes the most broken things, when handled with patience and care, can become the most beautiful, and Luna's dancing would continue to remind everyone who saw it that gratitude, when expressed with a full heart, has the power to transform not just individual lives, but entire communities.